Well, our guest today from the University of Duisburg-Essen is also a member of the European Parliament's Monetary Experts Panel. Ansgar Belke, tell us firstly about Greece. Is it a threat to progress now with proposals of a referendum?
I would agree to this view, because how to impose any conditionality on a population which refuses to underline and to accept the whole package, which was agreed upon. So in case the result is negative of the potential referendum, what would we see? We would see Greece exiting from the euro area in the end. And then we would be in a great mess, because there would be bank runs and so on.
Now, the key to get us out of this mess the key word has been leveraging. Isn't that exactly what got the banks into trouble in the first place, though?
Yes, the decisive thing is that things have been kept open, and the primacy of policy has been endangered by imposing everything on the banks. They can still decide upon how this is managed in the end. So the structure is very risky, and whether there will be enough investors is highly questionable.
Are the banks the big winners of this package? Some of their share prices jumped by 20% following the package.
But things have changed in the last days. So this time I would not agree to this interpretation, because things are left open. For instance, it's not clear whether the bank recapitalization, the financial means for it, would be taken from the profits, which would be acceptable, or from the loans which are given to the economy, and this would mean a credit crunch. So things are left to the detail, and this is still open.
Well, what about the big losers, the taxpayers? How much are they going to have to foot?
So let us go through the whole package. The first one is the haircut. I would have expected 60, more probably than 50, because it's not quite clear whether the growth prospects, growth forecasts are not too optimistic to go for sustainable debt in 2010. 2010 to 2020. What we expect is a debt to GDP ratio from ranging at about 120 percentage points of GDP. So this is good for the taxpayer, at least, to have a haircut. But bank recapitalization and the risky leveraging is a rather bad thing, because if you have a black swan event and Italy will go on the brink, this would be highly damaging for the taxpayer.
What about what's missing from the deal? Hard and fast fiscal rules.
Yes, fiscal rules are clearly missing, because what you have to have is something like a clear rule, a hardened stability and growth pact, and maybe the European semester is something what we see as a blueprint. We should harden it and go for some guarantees for underlining it, because countries failing to fulfill these criteria should be punished in a sense. Otherwise, Germany could not accept to go into the ESM mechanism.
Just briefly, Chinese involvement, could this really internationalize China's currency and pose a threat to the US dollar?
Indeed, it could, because the renminbi is on its way to challenge the dollar. Of course, China would not be prepared to take over the whole burden from the dollar, but it would like to share the burden between the euro and the dollar. So this would be only the beginning of China imposing some of its requests on the world economy.
Okay, don't go anywhere. We'll come back to you in a minute. First of all, let's home in on the role of the European Central Bank in helping solve this crisis. Its aim is to keep prices in the Eurozone stable, but it's also meant to remain independent. However, since May last year, the ECB has bought 173.5 billion euros in bonds from Italy, Spain, Greece, Ireland and Portugal. The bank is carrying a heavy burden for these troubled member states. Well, in the midst of all of this turmoil, the central bank has had a change at the helm. During this time of economic instability, many are wondering how the new ECB boss is going to sail through these uncharted waters.
All eyes are on the new president of the European Central Bank, Italian banker and economist Mario Draghi. Anti-bank protesters aren't thrilled about his appointment, not even in Italy. He has a reputation as a tough fiscal conservative and being strict on anti-inflation measures. He inherits the job from his predecessor Jean-Claude Trichet at a very challenging time for the ECB. Still under construction, the new ECB headquarters in Frankfurt are set to be ready by 2014. It's up to Draghi to decide what sort of bank the new premises will house. Insiders are confident he's the right man to stabilize the financial markets. But they say, like his predecessor, he will have to negotiate like a politician.
He's a trained economist and has international experience. He's worked for the Italian Treasury and various other institutions, so one can assume that he's up to speed on the regulatory framework.
If there's anything credible about Italy's financial state, it's thanks to him. Before the country introduced the euro, he helped steer it away from financial collapse. Today, many still see his down-to-earth approach as a welcome antidote to Berlusconi's populism. The question is, what will become of the euro? Analysts say in order to rescue the single currency, Draghi needs to set clear priorities.
Above all, he has to uphold the European Central Bank's considerable credibility, which means he can't suddenly go it alone. A second step is to demonstrate a certain pragmatism. The ECB is under greater pressure than during a normal economic cycle. Rather than just raising and lowering interest rates, it has to implement some unconventional measures to support the ailing banking system, such as supplying it with liquidity.
Observers say that in Draghi, Angela Merkel is dealing with the most German Italian in the world, and one who will ensure stability. But will he really? Draghi is taking over an ECB that critics say looks suspiciously like a bad bank at the moment. It has bought 160 billion euros of Greek government bonds. Has it bitten off more than it can chew?
The volume of government bonds the ECB have bought up is actually quite modest compared to the borrowing programs of the Bank of England and the US Federal Reserve. Obviously, the ECB is now facing greater risks.
Will it manage to retain its independence, or will it be instrumentalized by politicians? Will the new man at the top steer a steady course, or will he be constrained by circumstances? He recently admitted that dealing with sovereign default is still unknown territory. For the time being, trying to predict the future of the ECB is pointless. This is what it's supposed to look like one day, but it's only a virtual reality. Just like the absurdly high sums of money Draghi now manages.
Back to our studio guest, Ansgar Belke. Is it so uncertain, the direction that the ECB is going to take?
So I don't think so, because the legacy of Trichet is something Draghi has to tackle. And what we see is a kind of too high leveraging of financial institutions and the government and the private households as well. So here would be the main request to do for Draghi. So on the other hand, an Italian central banker is very interesting to have here because he has to harden its reputation, in contrast to a German who would also be the chief of the ECB.
Now, Draghi has talked about using non-conventional measures. What does that mean?
Non-conventional measures, as the name says, is addressing some kind of policy instruments which are not used in normal times, as we see normal refinancing operations, giving money to an unlimited amount to the banks, unlimited duration and so on. This is meaning unconventional monetary policies.
How effective have the policies been in the bond buying scheme of the ECBs?
If you look at the spreads, they are there where they stood at the beginning, just before the package was concluded. So I think Europe is burning still on the financial markets.
We've already seen 2 senior Germans resign from the ECB. Could there be more trouble ahead?
There might be more trouble ahead because the Bundestag announced that it does not want to see the ECB involved anymore, and the contrary has been implicitly concluded upon at the last summit. So there is much rivalry between the highly indebted countries and the northern countries.
Okay, Ansgar Belke, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you for your insight.
Thank you very much.